Welcome everyone, I hope this finds you well. It's 2:50 a.m. here in Canberra, Australia, and the mood for these sorts of things strikes when it does, and it's a mixture of factors, of circumstance, timing, that kind of thing. And when I can't sleep, or when I just want to have that time to myself, which often people with very few of the super traditional vices, I don't know, the drugs or the drinking or whatever, or the partying, I don't have any of those. And one of my small vices is that I just stay up a whole bunch and dive into the existence-ness of everything, And one thing I was doing is I kind of go from A to Z through my YouTube subscriptions, and very near the top is Fleet Foxes, and I regularly just give it a wave, hi there, in this, swirling, ever increasingly algorithm-tastic world where we're sort of shepherded and sort of shoved towards content. I just like to have that grounding process of actually just sitting with what, A to Z, these are my vibes, these are my things, instead of having a robot determine that for me. And speaking of grounding energies, musically, creatively, since 2008, first hearing them, I even have a sense of having encountered them in 2006, I believe, leading up to their debut, Fleet Foxes. And I want to also talk about the scenarios in life where we feel something so strongly that we almost push the thing away, because to pour ourselves into talking about it or being present with it is almost too much, because the kinship is just and the emotions just run very high. And I think put off recording the first episode of this for quite some time. But what tipped it was about 30 minutes or so ago, probably less, 15 minutes or so, I just come across Fleet Fox's Sunblind Japanese lyrics 23 hours ago, uploaded on YouTube, and it all finally clicked. So the journey from the earliest kind of awareness I had of the band, resonating with them in 2008, having them guide me through some extremely dark times, very heavy times, and to this point where I can just, with this life setup that I have now, which is beautiful, that I can do my thing of, I've got my main government stuff that I do, and then I have my creative stuff on the side. So the three things I do is I make the art, the patterns, which you may have seen, and you'll see them in the description. That's number one. Number two is my storytelling, which I do with the quantum myth. It's sort of a gestalt Venn diagramming of different kinds of world mythologies, and it's just my own interpretation of what mythology is, so my own myth sort of thing. And then number three is the media and the podcasts, which you're listening to one of those now. All going to the one feed, the Albert Kesser podcast, but for topic-specific ones, I group them under separate feeds for the listener's convenience, and also for my absolute unabashed love for admin. I just love, I think in another life I owned a post office or something, just putting different packages and letters and postcards and all the different kind of postcode boxes or whatever, however that works. It's just so satisfying for me. So, and I love designing the podcast art as well. It's just a fun creative exercise of layout and fonts and that kind of thing. And what tipped me for this is I set up the Instagram leading up to Shore, when that beautiful, constantly self-surpassing themselves, aren't they, Fleet Foxes? Aren't you, Robin? You, Kindred mofo, you. Outdoing himself. He's a Kindred dude, and Yeah, it's such a special record for me. On the night that I was first listening to it, I listened to the premiere. As it was premiering, I'll never forget, I'm sitting on the exact same, essentially the same spot I was, roughly at the same time of morning, actually. I was on a weekend though, and I was in the process of just doing a big sort of audit, I guess, of my energy and my priorities in my life. And I ended up that same morning listening to the full record. Oh man, I get so emotional when I think about this music, man. It's been there for so many moments. And that's the thing, is things can change. Relationships and friends and places we find ourselves geographically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, psychologically, whatever. And then there's these beautiful, I guess, anchors, of creativity, like music, that are just there and unconditional. I'm sure this is something that people who resonate with like animals and like have animals living with them, that they have that sense of the unconditional love that's there, and the unconditional presence of something you can just sort of evoke and kind of immerse yourself in like a warm blanket, and that's Fleet Foxes for me. And it's never wavered in that role that it has in my life. And I did a giant sweep on this morning of When Shore was the video, beautiful album, visual storytelling, jumping around in all these visuals. And the reason I think I'm going like a bit quiet when I think about it is that it was just... Okay, ready? This is going to lead into the core of why it was finally time to record this. Is so when I was a kid, like a long time ago, 1990, early 90s, there are a couple of things in my life that I just remember very intuitively resonating with. Obviously one was nature, and I just always loved trees, climbing trees, the green. I went to primary school here in Canberra at Yarralumla Primary School, and there's like willow trees swaying around, and I'd spend my my lunches on the oval, and I was always all about nature, and in a real way, not in some kind of, I suppose one of the ways that people describe it is like the hippy dippy way, where it's in that heightened way of like, nature, and it's like, no, for me, since I was like the earliest I can remember, it was always just such a grounding experience. And Fleet Foxes, I feel as though it's like they give musical voice to the feeling of being serenely in a nature and in a natural space, and that can be either in nature or at peace in your own nature, as a person, and sitting with your nature as a person, and one of as well as the primary school thing of like in the real world, that's the first layer of it, is nature and like climbing. I just was climbing all the time. I actually ended up getting a bad knee because of it, but no regrets. I've healed. I did some surgery, so it's gotten a bit better. And there was also a couple of films for me. One of them was, The Fox and the Hound. So again, that occurrence of the term fox in relation to like beautiful foresty, environments. And again, that was animated a couple of decades ago now. And there's just obviously in those earlier films, there's like a bit of a cozy, warm, fuzzy quality to the animation. Nothing is clean cut, 8K, 4K, whatever, pristineness, which has its own benefits. I'm not hating. Just a different thing, just a different feeling. And there was also a film called Milo and Otis, and obviously some things have come up about the production and animal cruelty. There was clear shots where these animals honestly were probably like placed in front of the camera or thrown in front of the camera or whatever. Like, it was a Japanese production, and this is as you're a kid, you're not really thinking about these things. It's don't think I could watch it from the same space nowadays, but I would at least want to believe that the majority of the production was wholesome and that they looked after the animals as much as possible, and that they only put them in the threatening situations to achieve a shot, and then they kept them safe. Obviously, actually, film sets have multiple animals, of the same kind, so that in case one for any reason can't perform, they swap the other in, and so that's like common practice for shooting animals, on camera. And so with that little modern world adult disclaimer there, excuse me. When I was a kid, I watched this film. I watched it many times. And if you look at that film, it was filmed in the 80s, I believe, or in the late 70s. And this is very, very close to my kinship with Tame Impala, who Fleet Foxes and Tame Impala are like siblings. I came across them at roughly the same time. And they both have I guess to try and put a term to it, is a psychophotographic, landscape, if that makes sense. So like the landscape that is conjured when you listen to them in your psyche, And for me, anytime I listen to Fleet Foxes, and it's so insane, it's building up to this moment of tipping into recording tonight, or this morning, is that the visuals of Milo and Otis are of this fuzzy footage of these beautiful landscapes in Japan, which it was filmed in a certain way to make it, indistinguishable from, it's narrated by Dudley Moore of the comedy duo Peter Cook and Dudley Moore, and it's such a, his narration is so earnest and wholesome, and even though again, that interplay between the adult consciousness of crassness, the realities, the harshnesses of adult life, juxtaposed with the innocence of youth. Dudley, some very cheeky, and I enjoyed that. The Pete and Cook and Dudley Moore are really lovely in their own way, and funny in that sort of adult-leaning aspect. But at the time when I was young, I was just watching Milo and Otis, and there's certain moments that are just indelibly embedded in my mind, but it is a dreaming nest, and so this little kitten is lost, as part of the journey is them reconnecting and then finding their way back home. A lovely little microcosm of the arc of life, and just setting out onto an adventure, very kind of Campbellian with that hero's journey component. And there's the dreaming nest, it's such a beautiful name, first of all, and then imagine that you're lost at night and then you come across an owl, and if some of you may be listening being like, I know, I relate to that, because when I was listening and reading Fleet Foxes lyrics, it reminded me of this, owls and rivers and Milo and Otis. First of all, these names, one of the earliest motifs of the Fleet Foxes music, which Robin was influenced by Nobuo Uematsu, right? And one thing with them is that they have, just like with Star Wars, they have outlandish names like the Clouds and the Aeriths, but you'll also come across some normal names like Paul the Hippo or whatever. So this thing of bucolic imagery, fuzzy camera work because of the time in which it was filmed, stuff like Milo and Otis, and even Monty Python. Whenever I see, again, the psychophotographic landscape of Monty Python for me is glistening, beautiful, tinkling, I guess, whatever, fountains, and in London Square, and then but also predominantly for me it's rural England, rural England shot in the 70s. It straight up makes me cry. It's if I could just exist in that, like disembodiedly, like a disembodied consciousness, just forever, exploring 1970s England peacefully. 1970s English countryside, just floating across that landscape as just an entity without a body attached, out of time, out of any kind of passage of time, just enjoying and listening to nature. And that experiential nature to my relationship of, with these visuals and this music and stuff, yeah. And so maybe if you've connected things, it's all good. I'm happy to provide context. So it's like you have all of these things mixed together, and then when I came across, again, fast forward from my childhood to hearing, I just heard Fleet Foxes. They didn't have any particular imagery attached. I think maybe I had seen in a recommended video or something, in the side of like a YouTube pane or something, one of their music videos, but they didn't really have anything where it was that shot on 1980s 1970s camera. It didn't. They had the claymation for White Winter Hymnal, but there was just a sense to it. And I saw them perform on SNL, which was the first time I saw them. Like, I didn't see them live as in, because I live in Australia, but I saw the video of it, obviously. And Robin's vibe and the band's vibe just immediately evoked, and of course the music. The music is everything with Fleet Foxes, and that's, like with Ghost, for example. I also did the Ghost podcast. Like, the music is huge, but it's also about the imagery of the band and stuff themselves. But for Fleet Foxes, it's like, it's Robin, it's Skylar, it's the band, and it's the music, and then the imagery sort of beautifully garnishes that. And so I'm in 2008, after my army accident. Super quick, in September, and it's weird because it happened on September 11th too. Weirdly, auspicious date. I was in the army, and I was on a firing range, and it was a 180-degree firing range, so in the bush, right? And my unit of soldiers totally forgot about me. They forgot high-vis vest, hearing protection, bulletproof vest, and radio. So all four of them, I didn't have any of them. So, and usually you do a head count before you start the exercise, and so after that, I managed to stay out of the line of fire and put my hands up, and I managed to get out without any holes in me, as one of the soldiers on that day put it, and tried to laugh it off. But yeah, it was pretty intense. And after that, I was in, I guess, existential convalescence mode for a couple of years, and I came across Helplessness Blues, which is celebrating its 10th anniversary this year. That was 2011. But yeah, I came across the band. For some reason I was like, I have to mention that. And then I sometimes get, for some reason, confused about whether the debut record came out in 08 or 06. But I'm pretty sure I came across Fleet Foxes in 06. I feel like they accompanied me through the army, but I think they really came into full awareness in my life when I was living at Scullen. It's a suburb here. Canberra, actually. And I was living in a beautiful little house on Boddington Crescent. and I had started listening to them, I'm pretty certain in either 06, because I just have a very vivid memory of in 06 listening to the EP, with Mykonos and such. If I were to look that up, I'm sure I would come across, I'll do a quick little check now. So Mykonos SNL Fleet Foxes, it's either 06 or 08. I've got you can't really 2008. Yeah, last month. Okay, cool. Alright, so it would have been 2008. So it would have been just right as I had, because the accident was September 11, 2007. And so then I'm at home. That's right, yeah, now it's all hitting me. I go home to Canberra in the house that I was living in 06. So I recruited in 06. And then I'm back at this house after getting essentially shot at, but, you know, being on a firing range when they totally forgot about me, and listening to this record, and it was like a giant blanket, you know, so comforting, so like arresting. And I hear these performances on SNL, and then I look up the album, and I'm listening to the album, and I have it in my life, and I'm listening to it, and certain energies and vibes kind of conjure up. But then I moved to this place with my friends in Canberra, Boddington Crescent, and I'm spinning it there. And I don't know if you have this, folks, but when you mix an album with a location, there's an alchemy to it. You mix an album with a location, you know, and it's like it just clicked. So there was some trees behind. There was like a sort of a country trail that led from behind the house that you could walk up on, and I would walk a lot in this time, you know. And it's just, there's lots of trees here in Canberra. It's called the bush capital for a reason. And I just have very vivid flashes of listening to this music, and immediately the first image, and it's just listening to the music, I close my eyes and I see a foggy forest, you know, as I'm listening to Blue Ridge Mountains, you know. And it is overcast, and it is early morning, dusk, or, you know, dusk before dawn kind of thing. And then I see, like, actually in my mind's eye, like a little fox, you know, and like a family of foxes or whatever. And this is all rendered in like 1970s, 1980s, like David Attenborough kind of footage. And then my second awareness is of a bridge, you know, just like from Fox and the Hound, you know. And that just kind of gently kind of glides into my mind, you know. And I'm listening to this record, this self-titled record, and everything just comes at me. So that then suddenly that connection of the 1970s, 1980s footage, the psychophotoscape or whatever I called it clicks, and then instantly Fleet Foxes has become melded with Milo and Otis, you know, which was shot in Japan by a Japanese crew, you know, in the 70s or 80s. And it's just, folks, I'm like a fucking helplessly fucking deeply existential person. I come out on the end towards the light. Otherwise I wouldn't be. I regularly do, because I believe we trend towards the light because of that inner warmth we all live from. Like, that's a beautiful solace, is that our hearts are constantly pumping and generating warmth. And that's like, even though what we come from and return to is darkness, like who we are right now is light. And so that it's important to return to that truth, you know. Not time for darkness yet. That'll come in its own time. So it's the OG home, and it's where we're, you know, or arcing towards, but where we trend towards unto ourselves is light. And I was in this space of existentialism and darkness, and then this album came, and it just was this, you know, Tiger Mountain peasant song. If I really sit with it, I just bawl, I just cry. It's too beautiful, man. And it was timed actually with some heavy times for me with like relationships. It was like after Army, the accident, I think I was a little bit adrift and didn't really speak up for myself in the two relationships, you know, between 08 and 2011. And now I met my beautiful now fiance in 2012, and we've been together for like 9 years. But yeah, 08 first failed, 2011 second failed relationships, and then, you know, I had the self-titled to accompany me for the first one, and then I had Helplessness Blues to help me with the second one, you know. To a diminished degree though, because that second one was a fucking doozy. Even though there were lovely bucolic environments and horses involved and stuff. But so yeah, over and over I would listen to this record, and there's no favorites. They're just beautiful. All of those records. And then I in the lead up to Helplessness Blues, I think I was writing out what I thought some of the lyrics were, and I thought they had written a song called Wooden Man at some point. I wonder if that was like a seaside or something, but I think it ended up becoming Battery Kenzie or something from Helplessness Blues. I was reading Temeraire at the time, this book about the Napoleonic Wars as imagined by dragons, as imagined with dragons, instead of boats, you know. And again, a Helplessness Blues song, it just clicked. There's I can't remember what specific song, but it's talking about a fireplace. It's talking about, and it's just, I have a very clear image of like Lawrence, who's the main character of those books, like coming home and like kicking off his boots and like chilling out. It's like I could describe every corner of that room, of that scene, is how vivid it is in my mind. And the same thing with Fleet Foxes, with these vignettes that appear, these vibe vignettes, if you will. And for me, that's a huge. I never just, especially for the music that I resonate with deeply, it's never just about the music. With that, the ones that I resonate the deepest, like Daft Punk, it's like I can enjoy the beats there. Nothing really is conjured too much. But Fleet Foxes and Tame Impala are like, they are places of power. Like they resonate out these so powerfully. Whenever I listen to them, the imagery is overpowering. The energy is just, I just get enveloped. And that's, you know, again, it must be an attunement thing, or a particular resonance thing. You know how there's like certain voices sound a certain way in certain rooms or whatever, and it's like, for me, however way that I was brought into the world by the cosmos, with however way my mind works, is like that just alchemically syncs up with Fleet Foxes and Tame Impala, to the point where it's like, yeah, that music just has a very deep effect on me whenever I hear it. Like, it's not just music, it conjures images, feelings, and it is a guidance energy and a solace energy in my life, you know. And it's tied in a bit with Watership Down, tied in with Secret of Nim, as Fleet Foxes, of course. And yeah, as I mentioned, that overarching thing of 70s, 80s, there's just something about that, the film grain quality. And so then I'm listening to Shore, you know, fast forward again, Crack Up was okay. I did like Odaigahara, you know, the song with the name May in it. And see, as you can see, Crack Up, I think, was for him, it was an important record for him to make. I believe, like, all of them are wonderful unto themselves, but Shore is the integration of what Crack Up was with what the self-titled is. It feels like the self-titled and Crack Up had a child, and I have been doing a lot of integrating with myself, and, you know, auditing and confronting. And I think I was in that exact same space, energetically and in terms of just my life, on the night and in that week, seriously, of Shore coming out. And I felt like I had reached a shore of some kind within myself. I had, the two had met, you know, the boat and through the oceans, through the tumult, we had reached the shore. And I felt this way with the world politically, with everything in the world. And I'm still it's subsided a little bit, but I'm just so glad we are in this timeline where things have turned for the better in that way, where, you know, as much as we'd like to exist separately from that world of politics, we don't. And needless to say, without getting into it, it's like, I'm glad that there's more empathy in the highest office, you know, and that has led to people, the collective anxiety levels lowering, and with that clarity that I was able to get from knowing these things were on the way, and wanting to just, it was just everything aligned for me in that moment of, yeah, the days leading up to, and then the release itself of the record, and listening to it in the morning, and I packed up my vinyls. I packed up some of my, like, I had some statues. I think I was collecting some of those, like, game collector edition statues, and I felt like so many of these, you know, collections were getting away from me. It's like I literally don't listen to my vinyls. I don't. They just sit there. I don't really engage with the. I just get them on principle. These collectors things, you know, these. And I was like, it is time. And so I brought them both out, listening to Fleet Fox's Shore, fresh off the premiere video on YouTube. Listened to it, took them all to the stores and sold them, and it was wonderful. And I felt like so much lighter. And as it were, since selling the vinyls, and it was like, I would say like 40, 50 vinyls or something. I've been listening to music more than ever, because it's just, that's how I access music, and it's totally fine. We eventually shifted from horses to cars, and there's a presence of both, I think, in the Fleet Fox's Shore video. I love that there's a integration, you know. Miyazaki, also, there's a kinship there with the Japanese again, and this is building up to what tipped into the recording, is seeing, right, the Japanese lyrics, and then that's it. Fleet Fox's Milo and Otis, filmed in Japan, 1970s, 1980s footage. You know, and it's like, okay, there's the sign, you know. And I click play, and I see the little Japanese subtitles, and I took Japanese for, I would say, probably 6 months in Townsville, and I would say I am, I'm versed in it. Like, I could get by in Japan with it. Very, very basic, you know, just the basics, like, you know, arigato and sayonara and doko kara kimashita ka, which is, I think, where are you from, and yeah, the islands and stuff. So I could get by barely. And I was studying this, and again, that, you know, Ghibli, you know, or Studio Ghibli, they have a connection with the rural and with the simplicity, you know. Hideaki Anno as well, who is kindred with Hayao Miyazaki. Like, he'll cut away from nature to shots of like 1970s, 1980s looking pieces of tech, and I just love the Japanese sense of like, okay, we have tech, but guess what? Nature, overwhelmingly nature. Shinto, like, that's what guides everything. And sure, we can dive as much as we want into industry and all of that. Guess what's going to reclaim it if everyone just like turned things off for like 2 weeks? It's like nature's right there, older, more prominent, and that's what I mean, is it's solace bringing, because we know that is what we are nature, and we can fall back into it like a cushion, knowing that if we were to just stay still, it would just be there for us growing, you know. If I literally were to stay in some way, if I was able to survive without eating, perfectly still in this room for like 20 years or whatever, it would just be overgrown, you know. It would be dusty, obviously, but there would be like fucking stuff like growing through the floorboards or whatever, you know, over time, you know, maybe 100 years or whatever. And that is just this natural, I just like, how can you not derive solace from, as much as my crazy overthinking human brain can get me into all kinds of existential jams, imagine just sit with the fact that, like, as soon as you just quiet your mind and you just hear rustle of leaves, you know, and then you even see in the mirror and say, oh wow, my hair's growing, you know, and like my fingernails are growing, and it's like there's this, and that's my art that I make. It's just, I can't really, I used to do figures and illustration kind of stuff now, but now it's just the patterns, which is based on morphogenesis, which I'll just give you the whole spiel about morphogenesis. It is the manner in which nature creates her shapes, you know, and that's just, you can see my what I call it in my art sort of sense is the ever shaping. It's like something is ever taking shape, you know. And then my name for the like after death is like the ever yonder, you know. It's like we go from this process of changing shape from young to old, day to night, you know, all of this beautiful, you know, gradient like that is just the microcosm and the macrocosm of a day going by. And that is what Shore feels like. It feels like you waking up in that morning feeling from the start of the album into the evening. And there's some particular shots like the trickling water at night. It's like that is straight out of Milo and Otis. And I think the reason I didn't record this, I actually, believe it or not, I had set up a recording with the Reddit, the beautiful, it's very lively, the reddit.com/r/fleet_foxes. I think they've just decided to hang out in that place. There is /fleet foxes, but I think, the community decides where it wants to hang out. I say this with Ghosts. I say like, hey, there's actually Ghost Band, so let's go there. And they're like, we'll stick to Ghost BC, even though technically Tobias from Ghost is like, I hate the BC thing, but communities will go what they will. That's, again, another pattern, another vine crawling up a wall in the way in which it will, which is, before algorithms and shit, we just had vines growing in places as they would, based on patterns and stuff. So, and I think the reason why I didn't record this on the night of watching Shore is like it was overwhelming. I was like, so not only it would have been enough if if one of the songs had a music video that evoked Milo and Otis, but also that would have stunned me. But the whole damn album is this beautiful visual album, from this incredible filmmaker who I need to compliment right now, and I don't care how long it takes me. It's Kersti Janwardal, right? This incredible filmmaker. And it was overwhelming. And to the point where, I don't know if you have this, folks, but I think certain filmmakers play with this, but what if in 2008 I glimpsed 2021 energetically when I first heard Fleet Foxes and I saw this fuzzy footage? Did I somehow peer through time? It feels like I stepped into a memory of something. Like, I told this to Ray when we were in Dubrovnik, my fiance and I, in 2019, before the world changed forever after COVID. For the better, I believe. I think the deaths are terrible, but I think the reevaluation and the collective invitation to go within, literally like stay in your house and in your rooms and like think about things, and I manifest and I believe and I hope, I believe will make us better people. Yeah. Yes. In Dubrovnik, I turned to her, I said, we're inside a memory right now. And she said, oh, that's beautiful. I'm like, well, and it was kind of her to say, but what I meant by that, it wasn't just some aside. It was like, I felt like we were in a memory that our 50-year-old selves are looking back on right now. And I felt like it's like the Bastian moment in Never Ending Story when he looks up into the screen and you, the viewer, are like, oh man, that's the protagonist of this story looking straight at me who's reading his story. And I felt like I was looking straight at my 50-year-old self or 60-year-old self thinking of me. I'm the memory. I was in that memory, looking at myself, remembering me. And I wonder if some kind of similar, time-space flourish happened when in 2008 I first heard Fleet Foxes, and I had these images of these trickling creeks and this bark and these leaves and berries. And I grew up, I spent 2 years in Italy, which, usually is named after an Italian wind, and there's a kinship that the Japanese have with like the Italian countryside, and that they sort of recognize in their own bucolicness. And there's a beautiful, I think, kinship between European and Japanese, sensibilities. And Odaigahara, you could see even in Cracked, in Crack Up, I don't know why I say Cracked, that he had this awareness. And the Japanese photographer who took the photo of the cover of Crack Up, and with Milo and Otis, folks, it's like there's an element to it later on of reaching a shore. It's insane. I'm not making this up. If you watch Milo and Otis, there are shots that could be from this music video, this film, this beautiful film, which is one of my favorite films. Like, it's straight up one of my favorite films. Fleet Foxes, Sure, directed by Kirsty Jan Verdal, or Jan Verdal. Because I can just put it on and just either cry inside or cry outside and just be so happy. So happy that record came out when it did. And also, do you feel like sometimes you have an album that it's like, oh, I know that this will be with me during another heavy time, Like, I'll have this album with me as a friend in something coming up, It's like, it's like turning to your left and seeing a brand new good friend there, or an old good friend. Like, Fleet Foxes are an old friend energetically, and what's going to be vibey as vibes may is I, through the podcast, reach out to folks and get them on Zoom calls. And I did see Sean Pecknold. He had that thing when you send a message, it says seen. I was like, oh, cool. He spotted when I sent a couple of folks, including Kirsty, a message with my gratitude. And there's never any expectation or anything, but as vibes flow, to have them speak down the line on the podcast as this chronicle, which I do alongside my lovely fellow host, who I'll be hopefully speaking with soon, AD Slad, or A-Slad, A.Slad 3, that's their username, who has a beautiful tattoo now. They posted it on 23 weeks ago. In the strangest time of our lives, we still have much to be happy about. This was my reminder. This is an album of gratitude and optimism, two things that have come to me in waves since March. To my family and friends for being the shore. Hashtag Fleet Foxes. Hashtag Shore. And so, Chan, I am looking forward to speaking with you coming up. So we had set a recording date. I missed it. I apologize. This is like speaking directly to you. I'll send you this timestamp so you can visit this moment if you want to. Just that time when I name dropped you for the first time. So I'm looking forward to speaking with you on the next few episodes. Hopefully we can go through some of these songs and talk about certain spaces we are in and certain spaces they put you in. And then for each of those songs, there are millions of stories out there, like some of the ones I've been sharing tonight. So this community chronicle, but then also the creator chronicle, speaking with Skylar via Zoom, speaking with Robin via Zoom, with Sean about his animations as well, and definitely Kirsty. I need to talk to her about this film, this stunning film, so solace bringing. And some of the folks who are in the, all the sometimes, not even sometimes, aggressively criminally unsung collaborators on these projects. Those are the folks I want to Signal Boost showcase, and this is coming off of it. So again, another build up to this is just inexplicably, I've just been watching a lot of Abroad in Japan, which is just wonderful. Chris Broad, Kindred dude. I also have, I grabbed just simply Japan podcast on Instagram, and I'll speak more specifically about some of my experiences and vibes with that country there. For me, the pie chart of Japan is like 97% the rural, the traditional, that's my engagement with it. And then the rest is the modern, and in that sort of sphere of the games, which I have interactive podcasts as well there. But like I said, the post office man, that's me, eternally sorting things, But and yeah, so yeah, watching all of these abroad in Japan, and then just 3 a.m. Now it's 3:34 a.m. So 2-ish or whatever a.m. it was when it's like, okay, here we go. And also I want to give brief shouts outs to the dancers and the film crew. And there's a lot of wonderful, as vibes may, no pressure, no expectations. I like to say no expectations. I know it's awkward to say, but I'm sticking by my portmanteau of word creation, no pressures at all to these folks when I'm reaching out to them and seeing if they want to jump on this chronicle. And speaking with Chan, it'd be nice to, do that thing where it's like, you encounter a friend and then they know folks who would want to jump on the show and that sort of thing. So even though I had set up the recording, which I think people were just listening to the record, I was there waiting on the Zoom call. I think I'd sent a few invites out, people had replied, and then just no one showed, which I just think people were just like celebrating the album. Like, that is totally fine. I'm a massive introvert, so when you cancel plans on me, it is like a fucking gift. So and that comes from love as well, so shouts outs to fellow introverts out there. But folks, there you go. It was wonderful to go through this kind of storytelling introduction type thing with you all, and yeah, wherever this reached you, I hope it found you well, as I mentioned at the top of the show, and we'll start regularly doing at the start of shows. I say I hope you're all, like, I'll say like, hello everyone, and hope you're all doing well, that kind of thing. But then I'll talk as though it's like, I mean, I know you're there, but I think a good way to open these ones is like, I just wish you well, man. Like, I hope this finds you well. And I think one of the things that these things feel like is almost like a letter. Like, it's the modern equivalent of writing to one another, I suppose. I mean, we had emails and stuff. Yeah, I still use those emails. The pillar of the internet that even if... one of the pillars of the internet that even if you know, social media comes and goes, which it won't. I know it's here essentially to stay, though we shall see. But yeah, I think it is. We'll still have emails, we'll still have letters, and Fleet Foxes it vibes with that sense of, you know, there's a literatureness to it. There's a, you know, you can see with some of the font choices, and like Robin is a big old reader, like he reads, and the lyricism speaks to one who has read his books and knows lyrics, you know, and knows the language of I know it's 3 a.m, but yeah, the language of words. But what I mean by that is, like, filmmaking has a language. And I was saying this to Ray. I saw Godzilla vs. Kong recently, and I talked about how it's like, you know, no matter what your subject, you need to be able to tell the story with the language of film. And they're simple stories, these Fleet Foxes songs, like you know, you know, I'm Not My Season is one, but I want to talk about one of my favorite songs, A Young Man's Game. I think I might even, as a tail off, one thing we might do over time with this one is just go into some lyrics and just maybe take a song, talk about the lyrics there. And what I'll leave you with is to kind of express my my feeling I get sometimes of I'm getting old kind of thing. I know, like, it's just totally relative and age is totally arbitrary, but I think I might bear you forth into your day of wherever you find yourself with this, like riding a bike, making some scones, or brewing yourself a tea in like a lovely kitchen somewhere in the world. So I'll leave you with this. So this speaks to me in this moment. So, new day rising. Wow. A new day is literally rising. Also, again, folks, as I mentioned, this idea of time and space, what is this weirdness of like this resonance with certain energies, and then you're led from some unconscious place. I think, again, I'll complete my reading soon, but just as a little mini pre-aside prologue type thing, it's, you know, some part of that unconscious awareness of the lyrics that I maybe even had heard the lyric, and then it just got buried deep in sort of my unconscious vaults. Just that opening line, "New day rising." I didn't know that the Young Man's Game specifically started with that lyric, and here we go. So I bear you forth with this song, folks, and have a lovely day. So here we go. New day rising, come close the blue blinds. I'll be lying in my ocean of time. I could dress as Arthur Lee, scrape my shoes the right way. Maybe read Ulysses, but it's a young man's game. Dying fire, so tired of this place. Not inspired, can't keep to this pace. I could worry through each night, find something unique to say. I could pass as erudite, but it's a young man's game. You should know you're my last hope. I've been solving for the meaning of life. No one tried before, and likely I'm right. Not too straight or too clean, like your borrowed blue bike. I've been a rolling antique for all my life. You should know, you're my last hope. I've been lucky as sin. No one thing in my way, just the arena I was in. But it's a young man's game. Sending love to you all from Australia, good vibes, all that goodness. And until next time, bye for now.